Good morning, students. In chapter Silk Road, we have read up to the part where we see that the author and his driver Seaton, they have left Hor and they reach Darshan. They stay in a bungalow there. They are tired and hungry. The author started breathing through his mouth. His chest felt strangely heavy, and so he was not feeling well because of the cold. And Seaton, he took him to a Tibetan doctor the next day. So there he was given some medicine, and after taking those medicines, the author he felt much better. So we will continue from here now. Once he saw that I was going to live, Seaton left me. So he here is Seaton. So when Seaton he saw that the author he was fine now, he was doing well after taking the medicines, he was quite all right. Seaton he left him. So he decided to return to Lhasa because they had started their journey from Lhasa. So Seaton, so it was this point that from Darshan, Seaton was to return back. As a Buddhist, he told me he knew that it didn't really matter if I passed away, but he thought it would be bad for business. So while leaving Seaton, he told him, just like a Buddhist, that if he had passed away, it would not matter. That means जो Buddhist होते हैं, जो मोक्ष और निर्वाणा की प्राप्ति के लिए जब when they meditate, so उनके लिए ये जो तकलीफें होती हैं, दुख होता है, मौत होती है, खुशियां होती है, it hardly matters. So Buddhist जो है ऐसे feelings और emotions से काफी ऊपर उठ जाते हैं. So he said, just like a Buddhist, in a detached way, that how it would not matter even if he had passed away. But then he said it would matter, but it would be a bad thing for his business. Of course, Seaton, he was a driver, he was a guide. So अगर ऑथर की मौत हो जाती वहां पर तो ये उसके बिजनेस के लिए जरूर बुरा होता है ऑब्वियसली. अगर कोई कस्टमर है जिन्हें आप घुमाने ला रहे हो या इस तरह से उनकी मौत हो जाती है तो व्यापार पे इसका बुरा असर पड़ता है. लेकिन so Buddhist point of view से he said that it would have hardly mattered, but yes, it would have bad impact on his business. So इसके बाद सीतन जो है वो वहां से चला जाता है वापस लासा की तरफ. Darshan didn't look so horrible after a good night's sleep. It was still dusty, partially derelict, and punctuated by heaps of rubble and refuse. So Darshan jo hai, when the author had first reached there, it was night time, and because of his illness also, he didn't find the place quite interesting. But now the next morning, when he felt better, he found that it was not looking so bad. It was dusty, partially ruined, and had loads of rubble and refuse everywhere. यहाँ वहाँ चारी तरफ जो था गंदगी थी, लिटर था. सो इट वाज पंक्चुएटेड बाय हीप्स मींस यहाँ वहाँ चारों तरफ कहीं कहीं छोड़कर कुछ एरियाज पे गंदगी जरूर दिख रही थी. पार्शली डेरेलिक्ट, डेरेलिक्ट मींस इन अ काइंड ऑफ डिसोलेट डेजर्टेड प्लेस. सो सुनसान सा इलाका है लेकिन गंदगी वहां पर काफी सारी है. But the author says the sun shone brilliantly in a clear blue sky, and the outlook across the plain to the south gave me a vision of Himalayas commanded by a huge snow capped mountain, Gurla Mandhata, with just a wisp of cloud suspended over its summit. जो हिमालयन रेंज है वो श्रृंखला है पर्वतों की. सो फ्रॉम देयर ही कुड सी द व्यू ऑफ हिमालयाज. इट गेव हिम अ विजन ऑफ हिमालयाज. और वहां पर जो माउंटेन इस वक्त दिखाई दे रहा था वो कौन सा माउंटेन था? गुरला मंधाता. सो the brightly shining sun in the blue sky, it actually gave him the vision of Himalayas, particularly Gurla Mandhata, and he was able to see a little bit with clouds suspended over it. तो इसकी जो टॉप थी, जो चोटी थी, उस पर उन्हें कुछ बादल से दिखाई दे रहे थे समिट पर. So he was quite actually feeling better there, having the view of Gurla Mandhata, the mountain there. Then he adds, the town had a couple of rudimentary general stores selling Chinese cigarettes, soap, and other basic provision. So rudimentary general stores होते हैं जैसे जो पुराने primitive style के जो stores होते हैं. So वहाँ पर town जो था दार्शन का वहाँ पर कुछ general stores भी थे. And they basically sold cigarettes, soaps, and other provisions of everyday usage, and as well as the usual strings of prayer flags. सो वो जो प्रेयर फ्लैग्स होते हैं जो पिलग्रिमेज में चारों ओर पाए जाते हैं, जो पिलग्रिम्स भी आते हैं वो भी इनको अपने साथ लेकर जाते हैं, तो दोज वर आल्सो सोल्ड इन दोज शॉप बिकॉज इट वाज एन ओकेशन पिलग्रिमेज प्लेस ऑफ pilgrimage. So in front of one, sorry, so in front of one, men gathered in afternoon for a game of pool. The battered table looked supremely incongruous in open air. सो ऑथर क्या कहते हैं, और उन्हीं में से एक दुकान जो थी शॉप के सामने कुछ लोग गैदर्ड थे. दे वर प्लेइंग गेम ऑफ पूल एंड द टेबल इट वाज बैटर्ड, इट वाज एक्चुअली ब्रोकन. थोड़ा सा जो टेबल था वो डैमेज था एंड इट लुक्ड सुप्रीमली इनकॉन्ग्रुअस इन द ओपन एयर. सो वो टेबल जो था उस जगह के हिसाब से इट वाज लुकिंग टोटली अनसूटेबल. इनकॉन्ग्रुअस रेफर्स टू अनसूटेबल, जैसे उस जगह के लिए वो टेबल था ही नहीं इन द ओपन एयर. While nearby, women washed their long hair in the icy water of narrow brook that babbled down past my guest house. ब्रूक कहते हैं नदी, छोटी सी जो स्ट्रीम ऑफ वाटर. सो एक छोटी सी नदी जो थी वहां से गुजर रही थी उनकी गेस्ट हाउस के पीछे से. सो ही सॉ सम विमेन वॉशिंग देयर लॉन्ग हेयर इन द आईसी वाटर देयर. सो जब उन्होंने ये सारी चीजें देखी तो उसका वर्णन भी वो करते हैं कैसे जैसे उस टाउन में जो लोकल्स थे, जो वहाँ के लोग रहने वाले थे, दे हैड गैदर्ड इन फ्रंट ऑफ a shop. It was afternoon time. They were playing a game of pool, and in the open air, there near the brook, an icy water brook, the women they were washing their hair. आगे ऑथर कहते हैं Darshan felt relaxed and unhurried, but for me, it came with a significant drawback. There were no pilgrims. So, author जो है दार्शन को एक बहुत ही खूबसूरत सा जगह महसूस करते हैं कि it was a beautiful place, not so ugly, because that day when he was feeling very fine, he found the place that it was not so dusty, it was not so ugly to look at. So he found the town to be quite relaxing and a slow moving town. But there was a significant drawback. एक सबसे बड़ी मुश्किल जो उन्होंने महसूस की, and that was that there were no pilgrims. पिलग्रिम्स वहां पर जो यात्री थे, जो लोग श्रद्धालु थे, जो कोरा को करने के लिए आते हैं, क्योंकि जब सीजन होता है तो बहुत भीड़ होती है आसपास. बट द ड्रॉबैक दैट ही फेल्ट बिकॉज there were no pilgrims there at Darshan. So it was a setback for him. So he says that I had been told that at the highest of the pilgrimage season, the town was bustling with visitors. Many brought their own accommodation, enlarging the settlement round its edges as they set up their tents, which spilled down onto the plain. I had timed my arrival for the beginning of the season, but it seemed I was too early. Now, Darshan had no pilgrims, which was a kind of setback to him because he was told that in the peak season of pilgrimage in this town was actually filled with visitors. इतनी यहाँ भीड़ हो जाती थी that some brought their own accommodation such as tents. So ये जो tents थे they were set up in the plains. वो जो town था उसके edge पर उनकी periphery पर लोग अपने tents लगा लेते थे. So he felt that he had arrived at the place too early बिकॉज जो उसने अपनी प्लानिंग के हिसाब से उसकी प्लानिंग की उसकी अराइवल की प्लानिंग क्या थी दैट एट द बिगिनिंग ऑफ द सीजन जब ज्यादा पिलग्रिम्स नहीं होते हैं, ज्यादा विजिटर्स नहीं होते हैं. बट ही फेल्ट दैट ही हैड एक्चुअली अराइव्ड अ वे टू अर्ली. वो समय से बहुत ज्यादा पहले वहां पर पहुंच चुके थे. So one afternoon, he says that I sat pondering my options. Pondering means thinking over my options over a glass of tea in Darshan's only cafe. After a little consideration, I concluded they were severely limited. Clearly, I hadn't made much progress with my self help program on positive thinking. So, author क्या कहते हैं कि one afternoon he sat and he was thinking about his options while having a glass of tea at Darshan's only cafe. And what he found, he concluded that there were limited options for him as he made little progress on the self help program. कौन सा program? Positive thinking. Because he was making himself think that he will wait there, he will wait for the other pilgrims to arrive. So he kept himself hopeful this way. और इस तरह से काफी सोच विचार करने के बाद उन्होंने एक ही बात तय की दैट he was going to wait for the other pilgrims to arrive there at Darshan. In my defense, it hadn't been easy with all my sleeping difficulties, but however I looked at it, I could only wait. Obviously, अपने defense में उनको क्या problem पहले face हुई थी, that was he was having difficulty in sleeping. But it was not easy for him to wait there, but still, as he felt that he had no other option left than to wait until the peak season of pilgrimage. So he had to wait. जब तक और visitors आ नहीं जाते, उसे इंतजार करना ही पड़ता वहां पर. उसे पता था कि उसे सोने में तकलीफ हो रही है, और उन तकलीफों के बावजूद he had no other way except that he had to wait there. The pilgrimage trail was well trodden, but I didn't fancy doing it alone. The Kora was seasonal because parts of the routes were liable to block it by snow. Now, ऑथर ने ये भी देखा कि वो जो ट्रेल थी, जो पिलग्रिमेज जहां से गुजरते हैं, वहां एक रास्ता सा बना हुआ था, तो इट वाज वेल ट्रॉडन, काफी लोग वहां से गुजरे थे, तो वन कैन इजीली ट्रेल टू द पाथ. बट he says that I didn't fancy doing it alone, but he did not think of this idea. He didn't like the idea of going for the Kora alone, and he could not do Kora alone. And one thing was that there कि the Kora was seasonal. Kora जो था कुछ particular month में ही किया जाता था, and parts of the routes it was quite likely कि जो रास्ते हैं उन पर snowfall की वजह से काफी बर्फ जो है जमी हुई मिलेगी, and which will obviously block the trail. तो वो जो trail सी बनी होती है वो पूरी बर्फ से ढकी होगी. So he felt that he should wait there, he should not do the Kora alone. Then he says, I had no idea whether or not the snow had cleared. So वो ये भी ऐड करते हैं कि उनको इस बात का बिल्कुल भी आइडिया नहीं था कि जो वहां पाथ पर स्नो है वो क्लियर हो गई होगी या नहीं. बट आई वॉजंट एनकरेज बाय द चंक्स ऑफ डर्टी आइस दैट स्टिल क्लंग टू द बैंक्स ऑफ डार्शन्स ब्रूक. क्योंकि जो डार्शन की जो ब्रूक है, जो वहां से नदी बह रही थी, उसके बैंक पर स्टिल वन कुड सी द चंक्स ऑफ आइस देयर. डर्टी आइस वहां पर दिखाई दे सकती है. डर्टी आइस क्यों? क्योंकि वहां पर काफी धूल मिट्टी भी है, गंदगी भी है, और उनके ऊपर जो बर्फ जमी हुई है, इट्स लुकिंग क्वाइट डर्टी देयर. सो वो जो बैंक ऑफ रिवर है, स्टिल उस पर ये बात का इंडिकेशन था कि शायद जो आगे रास्ता है वहां पर बर्फ अभी भी जमी होगी. सो ही वाज नॉट श्योर ऑफ गेटिंग अ क्लियर पाथ अहेड. Since Seaton had left, I hadn't come across anyone in Darshan with enough English to answer even this most basic question. नाउ वो इस वक्त दार्शन में है, और वहां पर जो है बहुत विजिटर्स नहीं है, और लोकल्स जो है वहां के दे हार्डली कैन स्पीक इंग्लिश. सो ही वाज फेसिंग प्रॉब्लम ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन आल्सो देयर. So he had been facing this communication problems since Seaton left, and no one, the people, the locals there, they did not know much English. So he was also not getting any answer to the most basic questions about his path towards Mount Kailash. Until that is I met Norbu. So वो क्या कहते हैं कि it was then that he met Norbu there. The cafe was small, dark, and cavernous, with a long metal stove that ran down the middle. So author says that he met Norbu in a cafe, and this cafe was small and dark, and it had a vast, long metal stove in the middle of the this cafe. So he says that the walls and ceilings were wreathed in sheets of multicolored plastic of the stripped variety, broad blue, red, and white, that is made into stout, voluminous shopping bags sold over China and in many other countries of Asia as well as Europe. As such, plastic must rate as one of China's most successful exports along the Silk Route today. सो ऑथर हमें ये भी जानकारी देते हैं कि जो वॉल्स थे, जो सीलिंग्स थी ऑफ द कैफे, it was all covered with the multicolored plastic sheets of different colors, which was of broad blue, red, and white. And it is said that those plastics bags, they were made in China and were exported to different countries as well as Europe. And the author says that yes, of course, this plastic of China, it was quite successfully exported along the Silk Route, and thus it was also one of the हाईएस्ट ट्रेड ऑफ चाइना. सो ये जो प्लास्टिक वहां बनता था, जिसके बैग्स बनाए जाते थे, ये जो थे ये चाइना से एक्सपोर्ट किया जाता था, to different countries, and it was also exported through the Silk Road. The cafe had a single window beside which I had taken up position so that I could see the pages of my notebook. I had also brought a novel with me to help pass the time. Now, the author hai, he was in the cafe and it had only one window which he would take so that he could see his notebook clearly ताकि उन्हें काफी रोशनी मिले notebook पढ़ने के लिए, and he would also bring a novel so that he can pass his time there sitting alone and reading novel. So Norbu saw my book when he came in and asked with a gesture if he could sit opposite me at my rickety table. Rickety means table, shaky table. तो वो table था वो firm नहीं था, वो shaky सा था. So Norbu, when he saw the author reading his book, he came to him and he sat opposite to him. He said, "You English?" He inquired, and after he had ordered tea. So after ordering tea, he asked from the author that if he was an Englishman. I told him I was, and we struck up a conversation. So struck up a conversation means they started a conversation when Norbu he saw the author with his book and he sat with him there. I didn't think he was from those parts because he was wearing a windcheater and metal rimmed spectacles of Western style. He was Tibetan, he told me, but working in Beijing at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in the Institute of Ethnic Literature. I assumed he was on the same sort of field work. So the author says that I didn't think he was from those parts, means he was not one of those locals because the way he was wearing that wind cheater and the spectacles that he was wearing, they were of the Western style. And then he came to know that Norbu, he was a Tibetan and he was working at Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in Beijing, and he was working on ethnic literature, the classic literature. So he said that he assumed that he was on some sort of field work. Narrator thought that Norbu was on some field work. He was doing some research work from the institution side. Yes and no, he said. I have come to do the Kora. So Norbu कहता है कि हाँ भी और नहीं भी. He was on some sort of field work, but actually he was there to do the Kora. My heart jumped. Here, my is the author. He said when he came to know that Norbu was also there to complete his Kora, he felt actually happy. Norbu had been writing academic papers about Kailash Kora and its importance in various works of Buddhist literature for many years. He told me, but he had never actually done it himself. So Norbu he had been working on different academic papers of about Kailash Kora and its importance in Buddhist literature, but he had never done it himself. So he was there to have the experience of the parikrama, the Kora of Mount Kailash. My initial relief at meeting Norbu, who was also staying in the guest house, was tempered by the realization that he was almost as ill-equipped as I was for the pilgrimage. So narrator क्या कहते हैं कि was tempered means it was actually little hampered or destroyed when he came to know that he was also not properly equipped for the pilgrimage. Now see, when you go for such kind of Kora mountain climbing, then you must have all the accessories with you. You require a lot of articles to complete the Kora to climb mountains. But what the narrator found that Norbu, he was also not properly equipped to do the Kora. When he saw Norbu, he was excited at that moment. He was happy to see him. But when he came to know that he was also ill equipped, he also felt bad at that moment. He kept telling me how fat he was and how hard it was going to be. But Norbu, he was a man who was continuously talking, and he also informed the author that how much fat he was and how hard it was going to be. So वो कितना मोटा है और किस तरह से उसके लिए चढ़ाई चढ़ना मुश्किल होने वाला है. Very high up, he kept reminding me, so tiresome to walk. He wasn't really a practicing Buddhist. It transpired, but he had enthusiasm and he was, of course, Tibetan. So author कहते हैं कि he was not at all a practicing Buddhist, but the enthusiasm that he had, it also showed that how much enthusiastic he was to complete his Kora. Although I had originally envisaged making the trek in the company of devout believers, on reflection I decided that perhaps Norwu would turn out to be the ideal companion. सो ऑथर क्या कहते हैं, जब उन्होंने इस ट्रैक के बारे में सोचा था, प्रेडिक्ट किया था, तो he had thought that he would be in a good company of devout believers, deep believers, जो श्रद्धालु होते हैं, उन श्रद्धालुओं की कंपनी में he would complete his Quora. But on reflection, on thinking a lot, he found that Norbu was also going to be a good companion. He would turn out to be an ideal partner. He suggested we hire some yaks to carry out luggage, which I interpreted as a good sign. So when Norbu suggested that they should hire a yak, वहाँ जो एक animal, yak is an animal, so they thought that it would be better if they hire that animal, so it would be easier for them to carry their luggage while climbing up the mountain. And narrator also, he agreed to this, and he said that how he had no intention of prostrating himself all round the mountain. Prostrating means lying down, taking rest, lying down flat all over the mountain. कि रुक रुक कर intervals पे mountain पे बार बार लेट कर आराम करना, it was not going to be a good idea, and that's why it would be better if they hire some yaks to carry their luggage. So, Norbu, he said, not possible, he cried, collapsing across the table in hysterical laughter. It wasn't his style, and anyway, his tummy was too big. So, Norbu jo tha finally said it is not possible for him, while he collapsed across the table, laughing hilariously. वो पागलों की तरह जोर जोर से हंसने लगा, and जब वो हंस रहा था, उसकी tummy जो थी वो बहुत ज्यादा हिल रही थी. And narrator commented that it was definitely not his style of laughing because his tummy was also too big. So, students, here we see how the author, he has mentioned about his experience of visiting Mount Kailash, completing his Kora there. We see that how he has shared every part of this journey, when he started from Ravu, then how they crossed different plains, the mountain passes, then how he felt while being at high altitude, how his head throbbed, and then how when they started their journey further, when they reached Hor, Darshan, and finally he met Norbu at Darshan. So, this is all about the chapter Silk Road. Thank you all. Keep reading. Thank you.